some of these developers of residential communities to put money towards
Right.
expanding this road. It happened again at Connected City when it comes to Curly. You have a VOPH. A lot of these developers and landowners are required to widen these roads themselves, so the burden isn't as much on the taxpayers. So I think going forward, if there's going to be new development, new residential development along that road, we need to look very carefully at that and very seriously at requiring them to pay their fair share of widening that road going forward, like we've done in recent times. So with that, I just hope, I know you have to open up public comment, but I hope after that's over, we can have the support to have this on. Thank you.
Sure. Any further discussion from the board?
Well,
Commissioner Stark?
first of all, I can't read my book because it's so small, there's no way I can read this print. I don't know if you guys have that. Do you have the list that, so we can
I told him just put it on the bottom for now.
put what on?
Just add it to the list right now.
Oh, okay, now I can read it. I was going online
Those
to find
aging
it
eyes.
myself. Okay, so what you're talking about, Mike, is adding it where?
Just add it to the list. I don't
See
care if
where
it's on the
error
bottom
is,
right now.
Where the error is. That's it.
Just add it.
Oh, right there.
Just
Yeah.
on, make sure it's on the
Make
list.
sure it's on it, because we can't seek any funding unless
Yeah,
it's on that list.
yeah. Are we gonna sell that, or are we gonna run that park ourselves?
I don't think that final decision's been made. That'd be something I think we have to continue to discuss at the commission meeting.
Because, this is something we can also, since it's for economic development,
Mhm.
there may be different places we can
Correct,
pull money from.
correct. Mhm.
So,
You're 100% right.
Just
Mr.
to,
Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to
Commissioner
clarify that this list that you see is not your priority list. This is what's in the LRTP. These are lists of all the projects that are in the LRTP.
Mhm.
This includes county-funded projects, anything. Your priority list, MPO priority list, is a different list that then is used to fund projects that put in the 5-year road program. So I just want to clarify that.
It has to start here, though.
Thank you.
First step.
Mhm.
Commissioner Mariano?
Yeah, this is definitely a needed first step, and maybe I see that you're taking it not only from all the way up to 52, but you're going past it up to the county line as well. Just the way you're gonna look at this amendment, this road is whole Pasco, not only from 54, County Road 54, but all the way up to the county line.
County line
Is that how you
to
bring?
Hillsborough.
Right, so you're going all
Yes,
the way up.
that's already in the program.
That's the
No,
expansion.
not to Hills Road, to Hernando. Is it?
Yeah, that's-
The way the map shows, it looks like that red line's going all the way up.
The LRTP stops at 52,
Stops at 52?
yeah.
Okay. All right,
We do have-
Well,
I'm
we
actually
can-
fine with that anyway, because that's what we needed. So that's okay, just the red line looks a little different to me on the map. But I'm good with that. And I think as far as like, this park, office park parcel on 5275 Overpass Road, that's something that we'll have to see how it does play out. I mean, we'll look at what the best options are for the county down the road, but it is definitely a piece that's needed. Even if that wasn't coming forward, we'd still need it, but with all the other things going on, I think it lets us up that we may get that opportunity for extra funding too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Just, Mr. Chairman, just to add, I think, when this does move forward, again, this can be a future discussion, is, doing this, road right from the beginning and have, bike paths on there, have medians, so we're not going back down the road.
Right.
And wanting to add those amenities to the road. And I think, moving forward, as we see, new roads and roads expanding throughout Pasco, those are things we want to see anyways, right? We want to see those medians, we want to see nice medians, we want to see bike paths and walkable trails, especially along that road when you have schools
Sure.
on there. And right now, the kids are having to walk on the road. It's very dangerous, or in the grass, and it's not very conducive to, for a community that has a school, so.
We
Mr.
also have
Chairman?
a major interchange coming at overpass as
Correct.
well.
Commissioner Mariano?
And I think Commissioner Moore was right on point with that, the trails part, and if it means talking to the county about their park as well, the office park that is. When you take a look at the trails that run along the side, if we're gonna run a trail all the way up to the interchange you just referenced, bringing it up, and they can actually have an office park that's there, they're gonna go exercise, they can take a trail going all the way up the road, crossing over overpass, going to District
Mhm.
Park, great amenity.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay.
Just don't smash it up against the road, make it straight, and not put any shade on it, that's all I ask.
Curves, we need curves.
Don't
That's
make it a
right.
sidewalk, make it a trail.
That's right.
Be careful how you talk about those trails.
All right.
Sidewalks, some of those are glorified sidewalks, not.
All right. I'm going to open up the public hearing on this item. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Has anybody signed up to speak to this item? Seeing no one rise, I'll close the public
See,
hearing.
now move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
passes
All
unanimously.
right, thank you for the support.
Thank
everyone.
you.
We appreciate it.
Yes. All right, the approval of a work scope, item F.
Yes, so as part of our LCB committee and as part of our TD funding, we're required to do a TDSP, which is a Transit Development Service Plan. So as a TDP is to transit, as an LRTP is to the MPO, the TDSP is to the TD funding committee. So essentially, this is something that is done every 5 years when we renew our contract with the TD Commission, and then it's to be updated annually. So over a number of years, it's just kind of fallen into shambles. It's not a very pretty document. It's not a very current document. So we're going to use some of our TD Commission money and then some of the money that we're waiting from FTA for Kurt to produce this product and to do some outreach and to do a professional document to kind of keep the TD committee happy to know that we're actually on top of what we're on top of. So this is just an effort. We have a current GPC that can assist, so we're just asking for your approval to give them a notice to proceed once all our funds are available to get that document done. It has to be reviewed and approved by the LCB committee in May because it's due July 1st to the TD Commission. So it could be a 2 or 3 month project, so we don't want to waste any more time or lose any more time.
All right. What's the board's pleasure? Any discussion? Have a motion for approval?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, item G, ACOM.
Okay, deep breath. Without further ado, thanks to Jess Starkey and Commissioner Mariano, we are finally getting approval to proceed with our scope for the Cody River feasibility study.
Thank you.
Both cities have signed the interlocal. It is going to our Board of County Commissioners next Tuesday. Upon their signature, we will give the notice to proceed to ACOM to begin immediately. So that could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. We will keep you abreast of what's going on, of any issues, and you will basically get a recommendation of what can be done, what kind of costs. And I think that's really what we need to know before we can proceed to getting funding and going the next steps, grants or what have you.
This is gonna be so wonderful for the area, really.
I do have a motion down here for approval
I'll
already.
second, a little discussion as well.
Absolutely.
John, thanks for bringing this forward. I know it's been a contentious issue trying to just get it to this point, but I think it's going to be an awesome project. For many years, they wanted to happen, so for you bringing it forward, we greatly appreciate it. I just want to kind of offer a hand out there. I think the Greater West Pasco Realtors Association, if you need a meeting place for your venue for the public meeting after you do your initial sets through, I'm sure they'd be willing to give you that facility, which could house quite a few people there that are really close to that facility.
We could-
Absolutely.
We could also do that catches and give them some business in the tent, in the chicken.
I don't know if you'd have enough room, but we're open to whatever they would think. But that's a good idea as well.
Yeah, we will share it with the county. Mary Ellen Duke will be spearheading it. We'll be helping in any way, but essentially this is something that the county will spearhead and as part of the Harbors project. So we'll give you updates as you request or as you need. And yeah, we're excited about this. It's kind of a neat thing. So
Awesome.
thanks
Okay.
for your effort and
Very
your
good.
persistence.
All right,
Thank you again for all the hard work getting these municipalities together. Have a motion for approval in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thanks again for the hard work.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks.
That's good.
We need the other guys here to celebrate. Let's,
I know, I would have
let
missed
them know.
that.
Let them know. They missed it. All right. Appointment of the CAC alternate, item H.
Yes, so essentially, Commissioner Moore reached out to us and asked that we include somebody to serve on the CAC. You all are given appointments. We're coming next month with kind of a summary of all the appointments we currently have because some of them have expired, so we're going to ask for a renewal. But we currently have a full roster, so what we recommended is we could include her as an alternate. We could place her, we suggested behind Christy Zimmer, but he could be an alternate for anybody. So With that, we'd also ask you to submit additional alternates, but we will come to you next month. Her name is Sandy Graves, and so she's said that she would be happy to serve, but she would serve as an alternate at this point. We're going to review to make sure that all our members, some of them have not been attending, so we want to make sure they're still committed. If not, we could easily slope her into one of the full committee members, but at this time, we have a full roster, and as I said, we'll bring it to you next month, and any appointments or anybody that needs to be renewed, or if you have any suggestions with people you've appointed, we'll deal with it at that time. But we just need to add this at this point to include her on committee.
All right, and this is an at-large member to this?
Correct.
CSE, okay, very good. What's the board's pleasure?
Move for approval.
Well, I, with,
Okay,
under
motion and
discussion
second
with the
discussion.
correction, John Walsh is not with the PEDC anymore. So, and that's what you, who you have as the alternate.
That's what we're
member.
going to be cleaning up. Exactly.
Okay,
So we'll look at that next,
Yes, we're going to
next month.
clean up the roster with appropriate people and dates, and then
That's
get your approval on all of it.
you need somebody to,
Yeah, there's,
And
you don't have.
Get some more people.
yeah, so Commissioner Oakley, it says vacant, you said we have a full roster, so is there somebody there just on the list? Do you have somebody on?
the question
We need
was,
more alternates.
Yeah.
need more alternates?
But he doesn't even have the regular.
Regular
Regular member?
member,
He's gotta find someone.
Yeah, I'll have to find somebody.
okay, so you'll bring that back, okay.
And then just remind us, what is, that's a monthly meeting, and where do they have it, in the middle of the county, or is it all over?
Yeah, so they're kind of similar to, I guess not similar to you, because we'll meet in Land O'Lakes, we'll meet in Wesley Chapel. We rotate to try to accommodate them. We meet in the west side, so we rotate it to 3 or 4 different locations throughout the county. And they meet monthly prior to your meeting. They review just about everything we present to you, and they give us feedback. And
What time do they have those meetings? Are they evening meetings or morning?
their meetings are usually 9:30, and they're typically on a Wednesday,
Okay.
first Wednesday of the month. So yes, it is a day commitment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I make a recommendation, maybe put a one-page white paper together with where the meeting's gonna be for the next year, so I get a feel for what their obligations are, and
Yeah.
just so we can all hand it out as we're talking.
think that's a
People
good
say, "We'd like
idea.
to serve this committee."
Yeah,
I've been asked before, what the recommendations, try to get it from previous to you.
Sure. Well, we
So-
have the calendar that we present to them, but do you
Cal-
want something a
cal-
little more
the
about what
calendar's
their
great,
job
but
would
then-
be? And
Yeah, just a little bit of a, terminology as far as what they're gonna need to do. And-
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a motion and a second for approval of that large. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, Pasco County Public Transportation Report.
Kurt's here. He can answer your question.
Yeah, you have your question answered right here.
He can start with that.
How y'all doing this morning?
Good, good to
Kurt
see you.
Scheibel, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold right now. Kurt Scheibel, Director of Pasco County Transportation. Unfortunately, I got to start off with a little bit of sad. One of the things that we've been supporting for the past 3 to 4 years has been a van to take veterans down to the James E. Haley Hospital. I've been working with the Disabled American Veterans Association, Chapter 78, who's in Pasco County. I'm working on that. Unfortunately, their driver is leaving them, and so they're not going to be able to continue the service as is. So we were expecting a transition from now until March, but she decided to push that up, and they'll be stopping on Friday. Now, kind of a little bit flat-footed, but we had already planned this. I'm just accelerating. Excuse me. I'm accelerating those plans forward. I've been working with the VA, talking to a John Esteban, who is the VA, James E. Haley VA travel coordinator. And we're working on trying to get a contract with them so that we can provide the service. Now, that's between that point and this point, we're working on with the people that have been going down there to get them service down there. So we are trying to accomplish the transit and get those veterans to their, doctor's appointments, so forth. But you may hear some things on that. Please forward them to me, and I'll work with them as best I can to get them to their doctor's appointments. And we have multiple ways that we're working on getting that, including free passes, helping them get to the VA hospital here and take advantage of their service, or the clinic here and using their service, various other ways that we're doing on, and we are working on getting a contract with them, and PCPT will actually be one of their contract carriers, and we'll take the folks down there. So we are working on that, and just want to let you know in case you get anything from your constituents or customers. And then, other than that,
If I could,
Sure.
Um,
Commissioner Marion.
Does anyone know if the new veterans building that we're gonna get built will actually eliminate the need for all those trips down to Haley? Or
I'm sorry, I missed,
the new clinic that's gonna, new veterans clinic that's gonna come in north of the government center in Newport Richey, is that gonna replace a lot of those services that are down in Haley that we can actually do here?
I am unaware of that.
I believe so.
Okay.
I would hope so. That would make it a lot easier for some of our veterans and also allow me to help even more veterans get to their doctor's appointments. Some of those who can't get to even the clinic, because I can, during Pasco County, makes it a lot easier for me to get them around. But like I said, I can ask that question. But I do know that some, like I go down there for various things that I go for my veteran stuff, and there's nothing up here for that.
What if, I mean, how many, is it like, it's just a van that goes down to take these veterans back and
Just
forth?
like a 12-passenger van they take down.
Does it have advertising on it?
No, it was done by the Department of America, it was outside of our control. They're just the contractors, in a way.
No. What if we put one of our own vans and made it as kind of someone could advertise on, they're actually serving veterans to get to their services? Maybe that might be a good promotion item.
We could, when the contract actually gets done, that van would be probably one of the ones that would be done, because we'd be able to touch more advertising, be more advantageous, but it won't be the same van going down every time. It's just gonna be dependent on the times and the
Okay.
customer service, but
Right.
we are looking at all options, so, sir, because we just can't leave those folks in the lurch.
Is the answer?
Commissioner Starkey.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we be sure and discuss this at our next meeting and see where we are with this, so?
No, I will keep you very much informed, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If everything goes well, I hope to have a contract in front of the Pasco County Board of Commissioners saying, hey, we want to do this, and get your approval on it, because they'll have to be the actual signing authority on that. That is my ultimate
Is
goal.
that what you were talking about earlier?
No.
But as you well know, sometimes the Veterans Administration takes a little time to jump through their hoops and get a hold of those people.
Ask
So,
him on what you're talking
I
about.
think you'll get.
I'm sorry?
No, we're having a side.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was asking me if this was the issue,
She had another issue, Commissioner Starkey
but
did.
I think you know that I have.
About the Metropolitan Ministries and so
Or
forth?
whatever the solution is to get people in Holiday access to the Premier Health.
Well, there's, as you well know, there's multiple Premier Health sites around from the Metro, the Holiday era. The concern, the
The
issue.
only one I know is on Seven Springs. I visited it. There's Seven Springs and Perrine Ranch.
Mhm. The one that popped up when I was doing the original one was across from the hospital downtown.
Yeah, I don't-
It comes up Premier Health, and that was the one that I was thinking, as you know, you and I had that discussion on. The concern is, and this is the issue what's causing it, is because they have to connect with a couple of buses. That's causing it to be a little bit longer. And it's just an issue of the fixed route system on how it connects with the various things, and that's what's causing the long travel times, is the word I would put. But we do have buses that go back and forth within a half-mile walking distance of both sites. There is one connection they have to make because they have to go from one side of 54 and they have to walk across the street and down a little bit on 41 to catch the 41, I believe, to get to where they needed to go. But we do have the service there.
Oh, I know we have service. It's 2 hours. It's a 2-hour bus ride for the shortest. The shortest connection is 2 hours, and it gets them there at 4:55, so and they close at 5, so it's.
It varies because of how the 41 operates, because the 41 is going to different
So
locations.
there are 3 clinics. There's one in Dade City, there's one in Newport Richey, and there's one in Zeppelin Hills.
Mhm.
There's not one at North Bay, so I don't know what that is. But the one on the west side is on Seven Springs Boulevard and Perrine Hill.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe, I'm gonna defer it to your committee to figure out a solution,
Okay,
all right?
yeah, Kirk.
With the LCB? Yeah, we can,
Yeah,
we can look at something like that.
So I know you've been looking at some special routes to take care of, to make sure people get.
And
to
maybe
their
we
appointments.
partner with Metropolitan Ministries to have a weekly van, I don't know,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah,
Well, if we go a weekly van, we'd have to offer it to everybody. So it would be also, we'd have to offer it to Metropolitan Ministries, we'd have to offer it like the Rope Center, we'd also have to offer it to not just, it has to be for everybody, and that's where it starts to get into where do, what is your will on that? How many people do we want to do for? Because we have to apply it equally across. If we don't, then we're not following what we need to be following. So that would be the one caution I'd have, but it doesn't mean that we can't sit down and try and figure out something to make it work.
How much ridership is there for that?
Other than Commissioner Starkey, I've not heard of anybody having an issue with that customer-wise.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything in my district, so.
But if you can give me some names, maybe I can work something out with them. Maybe they do qualify for a paratransit service, then they get door to door. Those are things we can work with, and we can help those folks who don't have the media or the network access to do it. All they need to do is make a phone call, and my team will be glad to help them. We do it on a pretty regular basis, helping people that don't have that. And we take the application over the phone and we can even work with Metropolitan Ministries who will want to advocate for them. We can even work with them and work out those issues.
There are a
Chairman,
number of organizations
way.
working in that area, One Community Now, Metropolitan, and so I'll reach out to them and see if they can.
We're also
see if
having
there's-
another organization that's up on Shady Hills. I want to say it's the Baptist Church that's up there, but don't quote me on that, please. That have been in coordination with them because they're really anxious for our Shady Hills route. And they want to know how we can help them get people on the Shady Hills route that's coming up too. So there's a lot of organizations that we try and work with and help them do that type of stuff.
Commissioner Mariano.
Mr. Chairman, and the point I'm going to bring up might be something better for the commission to actually talk about, but Premier Healthcare also has a place up on Denton Avenue up in Hudson. There's no bus route that
Oh,
goes
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe,
yeah, I wonder why that's not on the map.
well, I'll tell you, probably because you can't get there by bus. And I know we're talking about doing that eventually, but maybe we should actually go talk to Premier and get them to go maybe put something down between Newport Richey, Port Richey, or somewhere on 19, where both north and south can get to it easy by a bus.
Yeah.
Instead of going up and down. So that'd probably be a commission topic, but
Well, the good news is Shady Hills is progressing really well. The problem we're running into is that the bus contract I can buy the buses off of has been delayed. It was supposed to have been out in December. We're now in January, still not out. We're just waiting for them to award it. As soon as it is, the board has already approved the money for the bus purchase, and I'll be purchasing the buses there. Unfortunately, it takes a year, but we're seeing if there's ways we can work around that so I can get the service, hopefully without, even if it may be even limited service, just one bus every 2 hours. It's better than no service at all. And it's going to go right down Denton Avenue, all the way down to where it turns into Peace Boulevard, I believe it is, and then up Shady Hills, turn around. And we're also working with our partners up in Hernando, the bus, and my goal is to make their connection up there. I think it's the red road or purple route, don't quote me on that one, and connecting with them so that it opens up even more transit options for both our counties.
and I think long-term it's a great plan to go, but I think still if Premier has those limited locations, then maybe something along 19 might be better served
And
anyway, because
I've
that's another
asked them
connection to
about-
get there, so that may be something we need to kind of push. I mean, I know they're in the hurricane shelter, they like it there, but I think maybe we can do a little better. And as far as that other connection on Denton Avenue, hopefully we're keeping a close eye on the connection for Hicks Road to connect.
I have
right
talked
up
to
Denton.
I've had talked to Mr. Biles about that, and he's aware of that. I believe at the last meeting, he and I discussed afterwards, and we are keeping an eye on that. Right now, we haven't seen anything come through, but if it does, one of the things I'm going to ask for is a bus stop also for that complex that we can use and various other things.
All right, so, John, if I could ask you then, just while we're on this topic, do we need to go add, like we just did with Old Pasco Road, that Hicks Road connection from New York Avenue up to Denton? Or no, actually, New York Ave to Bolton, which will then connect to Denton.
But more importantly, it needs to be in the TDP so that they can get and seek federal funding.
Can you make that an agenda item for down the road? I understand that's what we need to do next. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you done? Because I have new
Laura,
business.
Commissioner
No.
Starkey.
I'm all done unless I have any
Okay.
questions from
And
y'all.
driving here, I come up Moon Lake Road, and I know that's a pretty successful route for us.
Very big-
And I didn't notice this till I was further along, people standing at the bus stops because we didn't have any benches or shelters. Are there any on Moon Lake yet, or?
Not yet. I'm actively working that as we speak. I just got talking to my team yesterday about this, or I'm sorry, I'm losing track of days, 2 days ago. We're working with our bus bench contractor to get benches out there, but as we did with the 54. If they delay too long, I'm just going to go around them and put my own bus benches out there. So that's where we're at right now.
What about a sheltered bench?
Yes, shelters is the next thing. I'm still waiting on the final closeout of the last shelter project. I haven't got the final invoices on that, so I know how much I have to go forward. And that's what I'm waiting for right now. And once I have that number, I will be starting that process, both through the doing the research and working with the MPO, what they're seeing. I'm sorry, with John's team, basically, working on what they're seeing, and then also seeing where you've heard for benches or bus shelters that you think might need to do. And also, we're gonna do some outreach with the customers and do that where I might have 100 people a day or something like that, or a week, where I know they're standing at the location. The one location I've always seen, because I drive that road every day coming to work, and I always see someone standing there by the water's edge, but not it's right there where the actual fountain is kind of at. I see someone standing there almost every day. To me, that would be a perfect location for a shelter, because I don't want to put a shelter and no one use it. Plain and simple, that's just a waste of our resources. I want to put it where people are going to use it, in the same way with benches. And we are looking hard at that.
Good, because even if we, it takes a while to afford to put one at every stop, but we should have at least one sheltered on Moon Lake so that people can get to even be dropped off by someone at a sheltered stop if it's raining.
My team is, right now, it's
Kills me when I see
identified,
people standing, waiting for the bus in the rain.
my team has identified approximately 3, actually. That would be right there by the volunteer ways. You kind of go around the corner, there's that bus shelter, if you're going from Ridge Road towards 52. Right around the corner there's a, right there by the volunteer way. That's also another location. And this is going to be trickier. We have a lot of people, we kind of go into the little neighborhood. We pick up a lot of people in there. The problem is it's private property, and there's not really any right-of-way we can use there. So we're looking at how we're going to be able to leverage whatever we can do to be able to get shelters or even a bench into that area.
Thank you.
That is on my list, ma'am. It's high on my list also.
All right, Commissioner Mariano.
I talked with someone who's involved with the bench company through a chamber member. And from what I understand, are we having difficulties with these benches because we're trying to make them all ADA compliant, whereas we didn't before, and we're trying to square that away? Is there any discussions going on, any changes with the program from part of your staff to another part of your staff?
No, sir. That is one of my, we have money for it. We're actively going out and doing the surveys right now to see what bus benches do need to have ADA, not just the bus benches, but every stop that we have, because we're required by every stop to be accessible. And we're working on that as we speak. The next step is, after we identify them, is we're concurrently going along and getting our scope of contract work, which is going to require both a contractor to design the requirements, and someone to actually, it's mostly cement work is what it's going to be. And that's what we're working on now. I've been working with the facilities team on that, TJ working with his team on how we're going to make that forward. The budget's already there. The grants have already been approved. I just got to get just working through the process as we speak. And so that is there. And this is not, just so you all understand, this is not going to be a one-year project and we're done. This is going to be an ongoing project. It's never going to stop. And we'll continually be improving our shelters. And for me, it's important, having stood in the rain, or not in Florida, but in other places, staying in the snow, waiting for a bus to come. I want to know where the heck my bus is and how do I get out of the wind, or how do I get out of the rain. And those are two things that I want to try and enhance. And it goes along with that, even if you're in a wheelchair, it just seems to make it, or if you're disabled in any way, it makes it even worse.
I mean, the speed of this is important, I would think, because every one of those bus benches that's not out there, we're actually losing revenue to $30 a month, so we want to try to move it along, I would think.
We are trying to work with them. It's, without going too much detail, it's sometimes difficult to get a hold of those, of the advertising company. Mm-hmm. And we're working with that right now. We're having some connectivity. I think they've had some turnover, and I think that's what the issue is, and we're just trying to make sure that the right person is out there.
Okay, that was about their thought too, on the other end.
I'm sorry?
They thought that was the same part on your part as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay. Kurt, we appreciate that. Thank you for the info. All right, next up is the status report presentations, regional MPO collaboration study update. John?
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce Scott from Stantec. So this is a study that some of you participated in. It's been going on for the last year or so. And they were kind enough to come. That's why we changed our date to today, because this was when they were available. So they'll let you know what's going on, what they discovered, and what to do next. So with that, thank you.
I've got one. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks to John Villeneuve. I've had help with the last names. I think I nailed it. And Mr. Chairman and former chairman, who I spoke to several months ago about this project, and Commissioner Starkey and others have participated, I know. So what I'm going to try to do today, I'm trying to summarize 14 or 15 months worth of work in just a few minutes. And I'm going to let kind of your questions direct me. So I may bounce through some slides here and then come back to them depending on what your questions are. So try to be efficient with your time and not skip over too much. And there's a lot of detail that I'll skip over anyway. And I encourage you to go online to the TBARTA website and look at that report. I'll let you read this, and while you're doing it, I do want to thank Michael Case with TBARTA, who's here, and he was our contract manager throughout this. He had the interesting job of just making sure everything happened, the logistics occurred, and Stantec got paid its money and not offering his opinion, and they did a great job of doing that. It's been very tempting. I couldn't have done that. And then Jeffrey Kramer, he had the opposite job of giving his professional opinion every minute along the way, and I wouldn't have done this without him, and the University of South Florida and Qatar Center of Urban Transportation Research. Very instrumental, so I wanted to make sure you acknowledge them, and they're here to help me answer all the hard questions. So the objectives are on the left, and we're doing presentations this week at all the MPOs, actually, and we did Hillsborough a couple of nights ago. And so one of the things I want to make sure as a result of that is we understand that really our goal here was not to look at how to merge the MPOs together. And that was a common theme. And I want to make sure there's a lot more to this than just that. It's really about making challenging trips across geopolitical lines hopefully easier, ultimately. I mean, we're all in that boat, and that's why you're here, and I think that's why the MPOs exist. So the project overview, very quickly, the first few months and the first part of it was really about looking at data, and I tell people this is more for my benefit than probably anybody else's. So we were looking at a lot of data, a lot of information, found some interesting things. I tried to tailor these a little bit to each MPO, and we saw a lot of interesting growth trends. You guys are obviously growing very quickly. In fact, if you compare these core MPOs, Hillsborough, Fort Pinellas, Pasco, they are growing faster than their infrastructure can keep pace. And they can set up maybe for almost all of these, but the differential in Pasco is very high, very high. I don't have to tell you that. You're seeing some of the effects of that. So as you discussed, it's wonderful to sit in these meetings. I was an MPO director for many years, and it brings me back, usually in a good way, and to listen to all the projects they're talking about and then getting into the details. This project, to summarize, is a chance to, hopefully, an opportunity to step back and think about how things work, not just internally, but with your neighbors as well. Increasingly, your workers and residents are not staying within your county, and that's the trend. If that trend continues, it's going to become more and more and more obvious. So there are a number of recommendations in here that we'll get to at the end of my presentation that kind of address some of the issues that we've found. In the meantime, I'll just go through very quickly about how we arrived at this, how the questions you ask will certainly influence the answers you get, and that's true everywhere. May 2017, some of you, I think, participated in that initial workshop. I was not around at that point in time in the project. We were brought in later, towards the end of 2017. We've had a couple of workshops, the most recent of which was just in October of last year. In between, we've done a lot, and we've looked at and kind of distilled a lot of the information and comments we got from those stakeholders in May down to 10 key topics I'll show you in a second. And from that, we interviewed 9 MPOs fairly extensively to understand what we could learn from them. And then developing recommendations that just came out really at the first of this year, new year. So the 10 topics, I apologize for some of the text getting offline. Your staff here did a yeoman's job trying to correct my mistakes, and maybe a couple lingering here. But these 10 topics, they weren't all created equal. I tell that some children are loved a little bit more than others, and I think local and regional decision making is certainly one that got a lot of attention. And I think that regional project implementation and revenue were others, and public involvement has turned out to emerge as another very important thing. How do we continue to balance the local input, some of which you've heard here even today, with this notion of more collaboration regionally. They seem to be, in some people's minds, at odds. So those are the topics we explored, including with these 9 MPOs from around the country. We didn't just call the MPO director. Like I said, I used to be an MPO director, and if you called me and asked me how I was doing, it's all great. It's fantastic. We've never been better. And so we didn't just talk to the MPO director, we also talked to their partners, transit operators, state DOTs, and so on in some cases, to understand really what was going on in these regions with these 10 topics in these 10 areas. So I want to use this slide to mention the tremendous work done by the study management team, the SMT for short, another acronym for you. They have met 11 times throughout this process now, and have brought a tremendous amount of input under very difficult circumstances, because in some ways we're asking them to rethink how they do their business. I would also like to point out on this slide that your MPOs, including the one you're involved with here most directly, are doing a very good job. I'm a consultant. I work all over the country with many MPOs. I've worked with dozens of MPOs. I have been the MPO in 3 or 4 cases, and your MPOs here are doing a very good job, and your staff is doing a good job. That's not what this is about. This is about the interface kind of between them. So this is the part where I'm going to maybe accelerate just a tad. The 3rd workshop was October 29th, and I should offer this as well. Talking, at least with me on the phone, is free. I'm from Raleigh, but if you want to call me and get into details here, Michael has my number, and please feel free to do so. But I do want to touch on at least the workshop. A little different than the first 2. We wanted to make it both more open and more detailed, so we had a panel discussion at the very end of this, where we didn't just let people stand up and just voice their concerns or their issues or their desires. We also had the MPO directors, including John and those from Pinellas and Hillsborough up there, as well as me, to explain the study, and then 2 other MPOs, Broward and Metropolitan Orlando, so they could get a kind of variety of opinion on their issues, not just me talking like I'm doing to you today. We also wanted to make it more detailed, so we broke people out into groups, and if y'all participated, I know you were there, remember you?
I was there.
Yep, and so you got to kind of play with maps, and you had the ubiquitous now clicker-poly things that were supposedly anonymous, and so I'm going to go into some of the details of that a little bit. The way this thing was structured, we had an opening presentation, everybody broke out into 1 of 2 breakout groups, and then after an hour they flipped, so everybody got to do everything, they just had to flip it, and then that full group met for the panel discussion I mentioned earlier. So overall, about a half day of fun and games. So the first breakout group, where we got in really some of the details, kind of looked at 2 hypothetical scenarios. And these are hypothetical, but we cheated a little bit, and we looked at projects running across a big body of water, and regional projects that cross between more than 1 MPO. However, it's kind of important to remove people from their own context. As I said, I'm from Raleigh. If you ask me about Raleigh, I go back 20 years. I can tell you all about that, but it also brings baggage. And so we try to get people more focused into the process. And I think we were successful. We asked them 3 questions for each of these 2 scenarios. There were varied questions about how they would engage the public. Would that make a difference if these 2 or 3 MPOs were melded into one, or if they had a regional policy committee, or if their staffs were just 1 staff? And these were all the things at this workshop we're really starting to get into. Okay, here's kind of the directions we're thinking about. How does this actually work? What do you think about them? And I'm happy to report that people were able to focus on the process, which is not easy. It's not the most exciting thing. I think that people did get into this. They did what we intended them to do and think about process outcomes. A lot of the solutions that people talked about, and this is the highest level summary you can possibly imagine. There was 7 or 8 breakout groups in each breakout section of the meeting. So this is a very high level summary. I encourage you to look at notes. But most solutions were inclusive in recognizing the benefits of regional and collaborative initiatives, regardless of the MPO structure. I won't get into this. I'm going to skip a couple of these, if that's okay. The Hillsborough board on Tuesday was very happy that I skipped through some of this, so I hope that's the case here. This one caught my eye for you folks. So this is, if you could all, but valuing a smaller community's input. So the imaginary community of Alpena was one of the things that they looked at in those little scenarios. And, I used to be, like I said, MPO director, and we had small communities of a couple thousand people all the way up to the city of Raleigh and others that were hundreds of thousands of people. And this is always true. How you engage in smaller communities within any jurisdiction, an MPO is the constant challenge, and you are in some ways judged by how well you bring all the members together. One of the things we found out, and I think it is worthy of noting, regardless of what you do or don't do with this study, when it is finalized in February and March, is understanding that difficult decisions will come, but what you do in between them is just as important. So if you're working on projects that are locally important, it may not be very contentious, but these should be easy to grab. That's really important. Having your MPO staff go out and talk to individual communities as much as their work allows them to do is crucial. And I found that out many times in my 15 or so years as MPO director. Another one I think comes up a lot with this is it's not really if we're 1 or 17 MPOs or 3 MPOs, whatever. It's more about the amount of funding we have to dedicate to regional projects. Yes, we'd like to be able to have a regional transit system. Yes, we'd like to have this, like to have that. But money is just not there. So a lot of the conversation that we seem to hear in this is about policy and scarcity. One thing that we need to understand, I think I've heard this a few times, is that just because you have 3 MPOs versus 1, you may not be getting more or less dollars from federal or state sources under any rearrangement of that. There's no direct tie to that. However, people, at least in this working group, did talk about, well, indirectly, it might put you in a better position to get more dollars if you spoke with a more strong, consistent regional voice, whatever that means to you. It could be, all the way up to 1 MPO, just to having a better or stronger policy, regional policy body here, something like that. So that was noteworthy. So the clicker deals had a lot of questions too, and I'll go through them pretty quickly as well. So this breakout group was charged with looking at 10 or 11 questions. And we always, when we do these exercises, we always don't just move on to the next question. We always ask people, why did you pick answer C? And we kind of get people to download. So what we found out was that, generally speaking, people, if you think about a regional body, a regional staff somewhere helping out with regional projects, you're going to need staff, you're going to need support, you're going to need resources, of course. And a due structure did not seem to turn too many people off. There was general support for that. Surcharge for funding and executive committees, but they were always conditional. We like the idea of being able to move these regional decisions forward faster, cleaner. But how does that impact me? It was always sort of a but for at the end of the conversation. And I will move through some of these. So a decision-making structure that focuses on regionally significant projects, even if you had to wait your turn. So you may support something in Pinellas or Hillsborough first, and then your turn comes next. Well, how does that turn thing work? How does I know the merry-go-round comes around to me eventually? I flew into the Tampa airport from Raleigh a couple of days ago. Most people probably do coming into Pasco as well. That's obviously a regional kind of facility, so we can understand addressing that need. But, when do I get my turn? That kind of discussion was held quite a bit. The regional dues structure we talked about, 50% said generally yes. Another 40% said the yes, but, dues might be important, but I want to make sure my voice is heard loud and clear. County surcharge for regionally significant transportation projects. So I don't know what a county surcharge is, but bottom line is about 2/3 of the people said we need more money for regional projects. So what we're doing now is great for local projects. We could always use more there too, but the regional funding isn't there, but it needs to be, and we would support that. The executive committee, as you can see from the top graph, 23%, 24%, yes and no. Very, very hard discussion about what an executive committee, as you can imagine, looks like, how the voting structure works. And then the directions. So going forward, this week anyway, we've got you folks here today, and then Fort Pinellas tomorrow. And then we've had Hillsborough already. We will summarize these comments from everybody that you're going to give to me today and the others, and kind of address those uniquely in our final report, or the next draft of the report, I should say. Those of you that participated on the October 29th workshop saw something like this. The boxes around this, and perhaps you got a copy of this in your agenda packet. If not, we can provide that easily. Those things got migrated into the recommendations that were released at the beginning of this year. It was actually December 31st of last year, but you're just beginning to absorb these perhaps. The way these recommendations work is that we assume that there's kind of two big time periods of action. MPOs, by federal nature, if you will, think about things in decennial census terms. So the data comes out in around 2022, 2023. So a lot of our recommendations initially are focused on that time period, the first 4 years from now. And then there's a second tier of recommendations that would come out in the 2030, 2033 timeframe if these other things were done and you found success, and if the trends that we've seen about, that I mentioned earlier, about more and more commute trips happening between the counties and MPOs come to fruition. A few things, I won't dig into the details. I can certainly encourage you to look at the draft we submitted. But better, stronger technical data never hurts, including things that kind of look at these trip patterns back and forth. A big recommendation, I think, that came out of this was strengthening the Team A leadership group. And you folks already had a discussion earlier today about membership on that and the importance of attending it and what happens if you have a vote and not everybody is attending. So those things are really important. And so strengthening that body or a body like it would be the first step. And that would help you do some of these other things, including formalizing a regional element of transportation planning, identifying what regional projects are. What is a regional project? What makes it a regional project? Does it have to cross a county boundary? Or is something that improves the airport? Does that count as a regional project, or the port? So defining that collectively, many of these things in the first tier, to the top tier here, are really things you can do. I love the spotlight thing with this pointer, by the way. First time it ever happened was in a meeting in Washington, D.C., and it surprised me, but I've kind of turned my head on it. I like it now. So those things, a lot of them can be done with relatively smaller funds in some cases and fairly quickly. So, and none of them use the M word, the merge word, at all. Only when you get into the second tier of recommendations, which would incur, and this sounds like a long way away, but I assure you it's not as far as it seems, beginning close to 2030, we're even thinking about the voting structure question, which is difficult, it is onerous. We do make a recommendation in there about a platform or a system of voting you could start from. That discussion, that painful discussion. So if there was a regional body that focused just on regional projects, you guys would still control all the local projects, of course, that would help advance things, in our opinion. And further than that, I think an important recommendation here, this was actually brought up not just by me and Mr. Kramer and others, but even some of the MPOs, was what if we had like a voice in economics? I mean, a lot of transportation is devoted to supporting jobs and economic opportunity and things like that. It's not just about how fast we can move cars from one spot to another, how safely we can do that. Those are important, but other things are important too. We talked about the potential of looking at the Regional Planning Council as possibly a partner. Many MPOs across the country are in the same building, housing the same structure as their RPCs. They're called different things in different states, but that's kind of the way that works. That would bring in some elements of land planning, aging, which is an important aspect of transportation. Trust me, as you get older, everything doesn't look quite right on the road anymore. And so the aging people have different needs, different capacities. So these are things that RPC is already working on. So having that collaboration, many people have found to be fruitful. So that's the kind of the nutshell of the recommendations. Windows is not genuine. I totally agree with that statement. I don't know what that means. But, next steps. So I mentioned this earlier, but we are, cute, right? So we are in the middle of these workshops this week. We'll be taking comments back, and we will be approving that we've listened to everything you've said and the questions you've asked, and modifying our draft accordingly. The draft report we anticipate being out by February the 4th. And look for any final revisions after that. I think we have a date also that probably should be up here. February 22nd will be back to the TBARTA board as well. And that would wrap us up. So I've been coming here for about 15 months, and I will miss you guys, but I do appreciate your efforts and all your staff and all the help they've given me and our team. So if there's any questions, happy to try to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I'm sure we have questions.
I just have a statement, if you don't
Commissioner
mind.
Moore.
And thank you for being here. One of my concerns that I've expressed on multiple occasions on doing something like that is, and I think you had it up there, was the voting structure to ensure local influence. And as the fastest growing county, not only the Tampa Bay region, but probably the state of Florida, at times I feel we're snubbed, and I brought this up on TBARTA. We didn't get the members that I think we should have received, but that was a legislative choice by a legislator that set that up. But moving forward from personally, just speaking for me, to have any support of anything like this, I would want equal representation from Pasco County. When I say equal, if Hillsborough has 3, including their cities, we get 3. Pinellas has 3, we have 3. So you look at our growth patterns, you know, Pinellas, they're done. They're not growing anymore. They have to revitalize they are revitalizing some areas. The only thing they can do is go to vertical, right? They don't have any land left. Hillsborough is getting into that point. They're moving into South County, but eventually they're going to run out too, where we have growth that'll be here for many, many, many years to come. If you look at our population estimates, 750 by 30, possibly over 1 million by 40, that could move faster than that in reality, depending on obviously how the market's doing and how the trends are going forward. So, I would think from the beginning, we need to be assured we do have that, representation. And I look at, all the different councils and boards we have that deal with transportation and regional planning. The Regional Planning Council, we have TBARTA, we have TMA, how many do we need? At some point, some of those need to merge. They really do. We're going to be meeting ourselves to death when we could just have one large group of representation from each county that could tackle all these issues, probably on 1 or 2 boards or committees, in my opinion. But again, just stating the facts that we need to have equal representation here in Pasco County for me to even consider this going forward. So, and that includes staff too. I know it's a long time down the road, but when it comes to staff, if it gets to the point where we do proceed and these are merged, having that same representation from our staff, in Pasco, making sure we have, those folks that understand and know Pasco that are part of that regional MPO. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Starkey.
I think a merging of the 3 MPOs is way down the road, but I think this subset is something that does need to happen, and part of the reason why I think it's so important is that we're missing out on a lot of funding. By not having a regional voice, other areas are ahead of us, and I'm talking about in DC most of the time. So until we speak with a regional voice, we're way down the list. So, but we do want equal representation. I don't know the numbers, Commissioner, but I do think South Hillsborough is growing pretty fast too, and I don't know how they compare to us. I know per capita we're more, but I know they've got a lot of building permits going on down there. But South Hillsborough County is not part of the TMA region, right? Isn't it? Tampa, up to 54 and over to 19. Aren't we the core of the Tampa Bay area?
They have 3 reps from the entire county, so whoever they choose to put on.
But isn't the TMA circle? Well, I'm talking about TMA now. You're talking about MPO. That's right. Sorry, I mixed them up. But just know the TMA does not include South Hillsborough County. It's that heart of the Tampa Bay region.
Gotcha.
Where most of the issues are that we're trying to resolve in a method that gets us all together on the same page to go get federal funding.
Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All good points. I think, TBARTA, we should have had our transit people at the table. So I agree with that 100%. The equal voting between the counties, I agree with that as well. Let me throw a caveat out there as far as that goes. Let's face it, between the big city, as far as they've got an airport, they got a port. The core of what we do is going to be based upon that too. I'm open to have the consideration as we go forward to take a look at maybe each county gets 3 seats, maybe the port, maybe the airport gets another, as we go forward to kind of balance it to where their voice gets heard pretty strongly as well. Because we'll make sure that when we're building ways to get out of there or get into there, that those things get heard. I think even with that said, if Hillsborough wanted to do something a certain way, or the city of Tampa would do something, and it wasn't good for the region, there's still 6 votes to 5 votes that still would say, you know what, it's not a good project, we don't want to make it happen. So it does give a balance. You said you've been an MPO director, you said you're from Raleigh as well. And I know a lot of money that Florida at one time had that couldn't get together on went up to Raleigh. and they built a
Thank you.
rail line system. What-
Thank you.
If you would, from what you saw, from your perspective, the way we had operated in the Tampa Bay region, how did Raleigh benefit, and how could we have done it better to actually get more funding to us in speaking to that one voice?
Thank you. I zipped through a lot of my presentation. One of the 9 peer MPOs was actually Raleigh-Durham. Bless you. It wasn't my idea. The city management team made me interview my own thing. But there are 2 MPOs there that are side by side, Raleigh and then Durham, Chapel Hill, Carborough, that are about as far apart in their heads as you can probably be and still be physically that close. And in between them is the Research Triangle Park, which is a moderately well-known regional center, employment center. There, for many years, this discussion's been had, and I commend you guys for taking it further than we probably ever did with this study. I can tell you, for example, you mentioned, I assume you're referring to transit dollars. Well, yes, but that took a very, very long time to do with these 2 MPOs. And even today, the west side of that region is pursuing passenger light rail, and the east side of the region, the Raleigh side of the region, is pursuing bus rapid transit and expanded bus service. And no one really knows quite exactly how that's going to work in the middle. So the 2 MPO structure, yes, there has been movement to do projects, and we've certainly talked to people there that are justifiably proud of that. But are they still on the same page? I mean, if I'm being very candid and honest, I would say no, they are not. And if they had, done the merger thing, or at least had a regional body on top of those MPOs that was empowered to make those kinds of decisions and help make those decisions that are really difficult to make sometimes locally, I think that outcome would have been potentially faster and potentially a little bit more coordinated than you see it today. But yes, Charlotte hates this too, and so does everybody else. But we're starting to move forward, but it took a very long time, over a period of 2 decades, I assure you, to get to the point where we're at. And as I said, we're still not exactly singing from the same sheet of music. We're in the same book, but not in the same chapter necessarily.
How about Miami-Dade and what they did as far as the whole county coming together to speak with that one voice?
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with Miami-Dade, and I would probably defer to Mr. Kramer to talk about that one if he would like. While he's making his way up, one quick thing that I did not mention, I should have mentioned, one of our recommendations that I think touched on some of the comments you had is about connectivity to Tallahassee. And I think we discussed heavily, because 2 of those 9 peer MPOs had state legislators on their MPO policy boards. That would be difficult to do here because of the extensiveness of your state's sunshine laws. But as non-voting advisory members, they could participate in the MPO boards, and there's a big difference between having them connected at every single MPO board meeting versus getting occasional updates, randomly. They have to be there, they have to participate in discussions. And both Hampton Roads and the Salt Lake City, Utah MPO credited some of their successes very heavily to having state legislators present at every single MPO board meeting. Just a thought, and because you guys kind of touched on it a little bit too. So,
Interesting point.
Miami-Dade. So.
Yeah, I'm not in, well, I'll talk to the Miami-Dade situation a little bit. They're not that dissimilar from y'all here. They are a single urbanized area that stretches from south of Miami all the way up into Palm Beach County. Like you, they were formerly 3 separate urbanized areas. This area used to be 2 urbanized areas, got merged by the census in 1990. They were merged following the 2000 census. They still operate as 3 separate MPOs, one for Miami-Dade, one for Broward County, one for Palm Beach. They coordinate through something they call the SEFTEC, the South Florida Transportation Council, and which is not that dissimilar from the CCC or the TMA leadership group a little bit, but they actually put a little more weight behind it. They make some more decisions through that process. Miami-Dade on its own, however, remember, is nearly 3 million people just by itself. And so one of the reasons that they're able to pull in discretionary funding with or without their neighboring MPOs' assistance, if you will, is just by their sheer size, and also because of the number of strategic intermodal system facilities that exist within that county. So some of the state's discretionary funding programs are running through the SIS. You've probably heard that term, the Strategic Intermodal System. The more strategic intermodal system facilities you have, the more likelihood you are to receive that kind of discretionary funding. And so even if these 3 MPOs were to cooperate together, they'd be about the same size as Miami-Dade alone. If they were to work more closely together with Broward and Palm Beach, they'd be over 6 million people. They'd be very, very large. So I think that's something that sort of you need to keep in the back of your head. Also, Miami-Dade has a half-cent surcharge sales tax that they have had in place for quite a long time. So they're able to bring a lot of matching funds, particularly for transit, which helps them draw down more federal and state transit funds by being able to pony up the local match that's required for that type of funding. Does that answer your question?
It does, and you know, I'm glad you actually brought in the Palm Beach and Broward County getting together with it, because I was really, after I asked about them, I was actually thinking maybe Orlando might be a better market to compare, where you get different counties coming together. But since you brought that, they came together. So let me just dive into Miami-Dade a little bit. When they set themselves up with Miami-Dade having the larger population segment, how did they set up their funding parts as far as the projects that were getting done?
Well, so when they were set up following the 1973 Highway Act that mandated MPOs, they were their own urbanized area. So in federal law, an MPO was at that time was required to cover urbanized areas as defined by the census and whatever is anticipated to be urbanized within the next 20-year time frame. So they're trying to look out. And at that time, Miami was its own urbanized area. At that time also, Tampa was its own urbanized area, St. Pete and Clearwater were their own urbanized area, and they formed their own MPOs to cover those things. But for those of you who've attended the MPOAC Institute, we talk about areas that grow like amoebas, the way Orlando does, or Atlanta, versus the areas that are more like fingers interlocking. And most of Florida's urbanized areas have kind of grown together like that over time. So the census pays attention to that. It's really just a function of population density, and over time, the population density from Palm Beach to Broward to Miami-Dade grew together enough in those areas in between the centers that the density didn't fall off enough that they put them together. And that's what happened here as well.
Right.
So once you have these pre-existing MPOs, the way you do here, federal law changes from something called designation to redesignation. Redesignation rules are harder, and you know, it doesn't, it requires the agreement of all the parties already involved in the existing MPOs to get on board. And that's why this conversation is hard. Nobody wants to give up what they already have.
Michelle, one follow-up?
Yes.
So in trying to look at what we're doing, we've got 3 different counties coming together, set up with a core around us. And we've got one project right now, the BRT, that kind of like joins us all together.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see like and it is tough because you got the CCC, T-Bar, TMA. Should one of those be like the leadership group that looks over these bigger projects, and then we all still keep our own MPOs, we still have all our regular projects we want to control that's in our county?
That's among the short-range recommendations that we're making, is that the individual MPOs remain in place, and that they basically each collectively agree what would go on the TMA leadership's plate, so that you retain local control over what the TMA leadership group is looking at, and whether that's how you define regional projects, or whether you actually pick projects and say, here's what you look at, you run with the planning on that, we'll keep taking care of everything else, but that you are actually in the position of authority to put on, so they can't go beyond their boundaries, but you put in front of them, here's what we want you to work on, and try to work maybe as a more singular voice for bringing in funding for that specific project or those handful of projects. That's one of the suggestions that we're making early on, but it would require all 3 MPOs to want to do that.
Thank you. And I had a question on, the impetus for looking at this was to regionally coordinate projects, correct? But also, I mean, you talked about discretionary funding. Is there any, I mean, have we seen cases where MPOs have merged together and they've actually gotten more discretionary funds? I mean, I would just hate for us to merge, because as a local, you know, we would have to really work a lot harder to have our voice heard. So is there, I mean, is it successful or has it been successful when they've merged?
There's probably two parts to that answer need to be daylighted. One is you don't see many MPOs merging because of the difficulties that, we daylighted in this study, and I'm sure you encounter in these discussions in years past. So, experiential kind of anecdotal evidence is hard to come by on the merger side. But it's worth pointing out again that the great majority of the recommendations don't involve the merger question. It's really about, is there a regional category of projects that isn't moving the way we want it to? And what is the way to make that regional category projects move along without us, being hampered in our ability to do what we need to do locally, which we're already doing now? And so a lot of the recommendations are attempts at refining that top tier of projects. But that was my understanding of our mission going into the game. So I don't mean to redirect your question, but
No,
I just want
that's
to make
fine.
sure that we understand that, yes, mergers ultimately, if we continue these paths that we're on now, it may make sense in a while, but not currently.
Right.
I'd also add, just to give a little background, there've been, among the 9 peers that we looked at, there was one merger. The Hampton Roads area had 2 MPOs that merged sometime in the early 1980s. And outside of 2 small mergers in Connecticut, those are the only mergers of existing MPOs.
And those are smaller counties, right?
Any,
Those ones are for Hampton Roads?
no, they're Norfolk and Chesapeake. They're quite large. And not that dissimilar from you with a Chesapeake Bay and several bridge crossings in that area. So from that perspective, they're actually a fairly good peer to look at. But it has been so long since those MPOs merged, and they've gone through organizational structural changes over time. We're a victim of software accounting.
Wash your hands.
Yeah.
But do those areas, the other areas that haven't merged, do they come together for big regional projects in some form?
In some form and in some ways. So in looking at some of those other examples, we look at, for example, Portland in Oregon. They're actually, interestingly, they had an MPO divorce several years ago. So they used to be covered, the north side of the Columbia River is in the state of Washington. That used to be one MPO many decades ago. Now there are 2 MPOs, one for the Washington side of the river and one for the Oregon side of the river. So we looked at Metro. They do collaborate on bridge crossing, river crossing projects. They collaborate. They have a light rail system that operates in the Oregon side, and they're attempting to discuss extensions into Washington State. And they work closely with the MPO on the other side to try to draw in funds. And they were nearly successful at one point, but it was the Washington State Legislature that didn't go along with the plan. So the particular blockage in that case was one of the 2 state legislatures and not the local jurisdictions and not the MPOs. They keep working closely, and they actually have a standing body that meets regularly to meet the requirements of federal law, because they are one TMA, just like you were saying, one TMA covering multiple counties. So in order to be in compliance with federal law and their decision-making processes, they have the Metro Board, which makes decisions in Portland, but they have a body that meets, comprised of members of both MPOs to make more regional decisions.
Like our TMA?
On steroids, if you will. They do a lot more and a lot more formally, with a lot more authority. Right now, the TMA leadership group is basically advisory.
Right.
And so that group that makes those decisions in that area, they have teeth. The MPOs have to agree the 2 MPOs have to concur. So in the end, all the bodies have to make agreements. But that regional body has a lot more authority than this TMA leadership group does. That's why we're kind of looking at that peer and saying, okay, what if the TMA leadership group had somewhat more authority for a small number of projects that you put on their plate?
Right.
That would look more like that structure.
I think Hampton Roads is worthy of thinking about too, a little bit more, just because they merged, as said, in the 80s. I actually went through 10 years ago and did a structural kind of organizational improvement study for them. I would definitely count them as one of the most improved players of MPOs in the country. And they credit, like I said, the state legislators being their board as being very important, and they are very strong now in public engagement, whereas they didn't used to be. So I think that examination, we didn't accept everything we recommended back then, 10 years ago, but they did a lot of it. And I think, listening to the staff today when we talked to them, they recognize the value of it. So there's always bits and pieces in these things you can pull from and learn from and take on if you don't do the final full entree at the end. So.
Well, and I apologize to the board. I have to get out of here, so if y'all will allow me to hand the gavel to our former chair to finish. Yeah. So, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I will look online at the study, and I thank you.
Yeah, I think we're wrapping up anyway, so, yeah. All right, throw him back in the seat. Okay, so are we done?
We are.
Thank you, Scott, for all of your work, and I do think there's some very important comments that have been made here about how to move forward. So thank you for accommodating our schedules and being here today. We're on item B, and I know we're rounding down to the 12 o'clock hour here, and I know several people have to leave. So the Florida Turnpike Enterprises response to the MPO's boarding.
Yes, we just included, you had asked some questions at last month's meeting, and he just provided responses. So they were just for your information.
Okay.
Well, no, I have a discussion item on the second question. I want to start understanding when we're going to start talking more about the Tower Road flag and getting it on the funding list.
Okay.
Because 54 is going to need it. And I still want to know what the solution is for safe biking or walking from the east side to the west side of the site. Looking for that solution.
Okay. We will follow up accordingly. The next item was just correspondence from City of Newport Richey, which I think you all received. But if we could indulge you for a minute, Stephen Benson was here from FDOT. They have a couple of changes that they wanted to make to their presentation last week on some projects. We wanted you to be mindful of it in the event that you want us to, we have to respond by January 30th on that. So if you could just briefly go over it, if you want to weigh in so we can include those comments, that would be great.
Okay, quickly, Steve, good morning.
Sure, good morning.
Before we lose some folks here, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen Benson, FDOT. This is in follow-up to my presentation, the presentation that was made, I believe, several weeks ago or even last month on the tentative work program based upon the priorities that this board set last year and the update to the DOT's work program. There were 5 additional items that were not included in the presentation that were changes to the program that were made since then. And those items are relating to revenue estimate updates that occurred since the revenues were established prior. Revenues have gone down significantly for a variety of reasons, but that you're going to see some of those impacts here in some of these items. They're highlighted in yellow on your sheet. And in addition to that, some of these impacts were also triggered by impacts to the state's current year funding allocation provided by the legislature that has been used to address the emergency issues in the Panhandle, the recovery and the cleanup activities. So those current year impacts combined with future revenues that we project to actually be lower than anticipated are what has led to the changes here on your sheet. Obviously, we're accepting any comments or objections that you might have, and we'll take that up to the FTC and the governor as he looks at the 5 years. But I am happy to go through each of the 5, if you'll allow me to, and then I can answer any questions that you might have about what that means. But so in order from top to bottom, the first one is US 41 from Connerton to south of State Road 52. That was a widening project, roughly in the amount of a $25 million project. The construction was deferred from 2020 to 2021. It does not include the State Road 52 intersection. So if the intersection of State Road 52 is going to be expanded and widened in both directions. That's not part of this project. That project is part of the State Road 52 project, which is still on schedule to let this year. So that will still be occurring. This is the actual widening of 41 before and after the intersection.
So why is that deferred?
Because of the revenue projection decreases that occurred.
That's, I mean, that, I
For
mean,
the storm,
what?
when they had the storm all up in the panhandle.
Yeah, I understand. That's a disaster. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a miserable
Gosh.
experience for anybody in that area.
Yeah.
And here's the concern, and I'll actually probably have somebody, some other people reach out to, if need be, to the governor's office or whomever needs to happen, because that is also the location of our jail. We also have a fire station there, and it's definitely a public safety hazard at this time, because our trucks are attempting to get out, and they cannot get out. They literally cannot get out. They are stuck there. Our engines and rescues are stuck there, sometimes in the mornings and evenings. Once traffic is back to back, people can't get, pull off onto the shoulder. It's difficult. So I think I would ask to reconsider that, especially for the public safety issues that are going on there. Again, it's a commute issue, but what's more important is public safety. So I would ask that you find something else to push
Maybe.
back besides that.
To answer that for you, maybe they could put a temporary light in there, because that light was supposed to come along with that widening of that road to the south to Land Lakes. And we were right at the Governor's Center, we were supposed to get a light there, and that would help in moving that traffic and make it safer coming in and out of there.
You mean out of the jail?
Yeah, out of where the jail is and our
And we have a
building.
station, we have a rescue
And we have a
station right there.
station right there, yeah.
And I can appreciate the light too, but it doesn't mean that people won't be stuck there. I mean, I get it, that could be some relief,
That
but
moves, so.
I think the better option is not to have this pushed up another year and have the
Well,
light,
if
and
that
have the
could
signal,
happen, that'd be good.
and hit the signal. So I think when you're considering this, that needs to be taken into, effect, that we're not just talking about a normal situation here. We're talking about a severe public safety hazard. If we push off one of those engines 2 or 3 minutes, somebody could die. So I don't think, if you need to look at other projects, would be my recommendation. So I'll do what I need to do on my side, to put the heat on, but I would encourage you to look at something different.
Is that the biggest one on here, like the big number? Because we don't have numbers here.
The biggest dollar amount, there was also, let me see here. There was some projects that were right-of-way that moved, and then also the state road. Do you want me to go through all 5, or should I?
Yeah, I think the request was, you said 25 million, so the other 4 that are highlighted, are their numbers larger than that one? And I mean, that one, that's pretty significant, the first one that
The
you
one that
mentioned.
is larger is the very last one, State Road 52 realignment. That's an $87 million construction project that was deferred from 2019 into 2020. Yeah, the schedule, the impact was from a letting in June to a letting in July. So
Okay,
it's a
so that's-
1-month impact, which is why that one was bumped to 2020. But as you can see, that sucked up money in 2020, and so that's what's impacting the 41 project. So it's a kind of a waterfall effect from that current year issue that we're facing.
So, just a question is, so is
Yes.
every MPO seeing a list like this?
Yes.
And how did the numbers, how do you guys shake the numbers out between the different MPOs? I mean,
We balanced to the greatest extent feasible based upon population. That's what the statute requires us to do. And I say greatest extent feasible because these dollar amounts we don't control. That's the cost of the project. So we balance as closely as we can to the population.
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Yes,
Because I
sir.
do have to go, I apologize to me. So in addition to the
41.
No, in addition to the fire station and our utilities building, that's all, again, and the detention center, that's also where the new forensics facility is going and is being built now, that obviously our legislators added the funding for and gave us the appropriation for, and then that the governor had backed, and I know that the next governor, I'm sure, is in agreement with that facility too. So what we also have are people that are traveling from not only the state of Florida, but are going to be coming from all over the nation, if not the world, right, to visit that location. So we can add that to the mix too. So I'll call the sheriff too, and I'm sure he'll make a phone call in addition, because he's not going to be very happy about this either. So
Yeah, we just
it's going
had,
to pile on now.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
before you go, Commissioner Morris, so I'm going to make a motion that we look at holding on to the first item on the list, the second item on the list, that they don't get changed, and then the very bottom number on the list, all construction projects. The others we can defer, that's not as big a deal, but as long as
I'll second that, thank you.
we have a motion, we second, further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So do you got some direction on there? I know you wanted to walk through all of them, and you certainly can, but we're losing
Sorry.
quickly
I
here.
gotta-
Yeah.
Any further, anybody else have further questions here? I think you'll come back.
This may be a dumb question, but what is DAF?
It's just a note, it's district allocated funds, so some of, it's just a note, that's all.
Okay.
And
So-
this is because of the storm,
Storm
when the
coverage.
revenues were.
Combination of the storm as well as revenues in the outer years are decreasing due to fuel efficiency issues that are impacting us.
Even you also advanced the project in the energy.
Thanks, Jack.
There is a project in here that did advance, yes, so.
Which one is that?
The second item on the list, actually, on the far right, it says, that's the signal at Asbell Road and US 41. Construction was added to 2020.
Where's that?
Okay, and then, a sidewalk.
Added construction.
That's a lesser project, I see was advanced.
Okay.
Says here there was a sidewalk that was advanced, from old 54 to Little.
Those were previously reported changes, so just the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are new, that you haven't already seen.
So between the conversation was up here and the motion that was made, so will you or will somebody kind of update us again next month as we get ready to go into our legislative session and to know where we are with these?
We won't have an actual update next month, and because this is going to go up along with your comments to the legislature for review. So that was, I believe, what the request was
Okay.
comments to send
All
up
right, so we'll make sure that we.
along with this. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, cool. Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you very much.
All right, I think the rest is just the Weekend Institute.
Yeah, we wanted to see if we'll send another petition out, but we wanted to see who would like to attend. They're giving us 3 spots, and we can use MPO money to pay for it, so we just wanted to know in advance if any of you would like to.
And I think you have said, even if you've been before, if 10 years ago, whatever, and you wanted to go again, it's good to update. So, can I just make, I know everybody's leaving, but I did talk with you before the meeting about the Morningside extension. I know Commissioner Oakley has left, but I know it is on the LR, or I just need to make sure it's on the appropriate list. It's part of our legislative priorities for Dade City. I believe the county's getting involved, other bodies, so just please let us know what we need to do to make sure, I know it's on a list, and that we, not necessarily on our 5-year plan, but just somewhere there, and if that's a step that has to happen as we move forward, that's important for this legislative session. With that, any other comments?
I
Commissioner
just wanted to say again, that I'd really like someone to look at Trouble Creek for additional lights. That it is super dark in some places, not all the way along, but there are serious gaps missing at night and a sidewalk there and a lot of people walking. It's just not a safe road. I take it almost every night. And last night I was driving down Starkey Boulevard, turning onto Rangeland, and it's pitch black there as well. And the driver went on the wrong side of the road because you can't tell when you're turning left where the road is. It's a split road, and it was very scary. So that intersection needs some lighting or something. Then I was asked on Starkey Boulevard going north if the right lane that turns into Aristida could have a right turn arrow put on it as you're going north, just south of Aristida, because people are complaining that it's very dangerous for them. Cars are whizzing by, and I can't remember the specifics, but I've had 3 people ask me if I could ask y'all to put a right turn arrow on the south side of that road.
Anything else? Good, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming.